A massive thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Stick around for a special offer that will get you 2 months of Skillshare Premium for free. The words Call of Duty are almost synonymous with online multiplayer at this point, and so when last year's Black Ops 4 was revealed to be online only, the negative reaction was honestly a little surprising. I always thought most players skipped the campaign. When it was subsequently announced, however, that Infinity Ward was bringing back the single-player story for 2019's game, I have to say I felt a subtle sense of relief. Comfort? The release of Call of Duty has always marked the start of the holiday period for me, and there's a warmth, a familiarity to sitting down with a 4 to 5 hour Bayhem explosion fest. Like I wanted from Ghost Recon Breakpoint last month, it's a game you can totally switch your brain off to and just ride the roller coaster. Except this year, Infinity Ward came back from their couple of years off, apparently grizzled, confidently titling their game Modern Warfare, not only to evoke memories of the franchise's glory days, but also as a statement of intent. This ain't your granddad's Call of Duty, this is war in the modern age, baby. The game is operating on the notion that war really has changed from the good guys versus bad guys approach of prior titles to something of a moral and geographical soup, where nations and ideologies blur and allegiances come and go at the unknowable whims of the shady higher-ups in the chain of command. You're working with less than perfect intel, the threat is harder to define, the fight is taken away from the battlefield to places more intimate. You have to consider bystanders and rules of engagement as a result. And it's all in service of the question, how far are you willing to cross the line to get what you need? This game doesn't just have a mature content warning for one mission, this whole game is mature, it's gritty. It's taking risks and carrying the heavy responsibility of handling this sensitive subject matter with care in a way Call of Duty hasn't really attempted before. Except when you look back, it kind of has. But before we get into a specific example, let me quickly tell you about today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes covering dozens of creative and entrepreneurial skills. Whether you want to fuel your curiosity, creativity, or even career, Skillshare is the perfect place to keep you learning and thriving. Premium memberships give you unlimited access, so you can join any of the classes and communities that suit your particular needs. You may be familiar with Modern Warfare, but how about Modern Script Calligraphy? Honestly, this started as a joke to find a class with the word modern in the title, but ended up being an incredibly interesting, relaxed series that I watched in full. It also made me weirdly nostalgic for the simple act of writing with a pen and paper, such as the intellectual curiosity that Skillshare can inspire. Skillshare is also incredibly affordable, an annual subscription is less than $10 a month. And because Skillshare is sponsoring this video, you can sign up with my link in the description and get a 2-month free trial, so there's no risk to checking it out for yourself. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring the video, and now back to discussing how Call of Duty has at least attempted to take on heavier subject matter more subtly in the past. Take Call of Duty 4 for example, where the conflict reaches its logical conclusion. A nuke goes off, and as you control your soldier crawling around the scorched aftermath, you come across a playground. The echoes of children ring in the background as you slowly, painfully fade away. For the time, and considering where the Modern Warfare franchise ultimately found itself, this seems like a remarkably sharp way for the series to hint at a wider point about the innocent lives that get caught up in the crossfire of this action romp. You're not the only one killing, dying, surviving here. In Modern Warfare, it's like the developers took that playground and decided to model their fictional nation of Urzikstan after a dang Toys R Us, with building blocks and balls and bears presented so pristinely, placed so hyper-specifically in your direct path in snipers' nests, or propped up watching a static TV, that it can only come across as heavy-handed. The game flat out telling you, yeah, sure used to be kids here, but now there isn't because of goddamn war, rather than letting you stumble into these instances, come to these conclusions yourself. It speaks to a larger lack of subtlety seen throughout Modern Warfare's 5 to 6 hour campaign, especially in its handling of children and other non-combatants as part of the new battlefield you find yourselves fighting on. Not only is it perhaps a little tactless to litter your path forward with the bodies of dead children, or making it possible to shoot them, even if shooting them is an instant game over, the game's mechanics are constantly undermining whatever semblance of a point the developers are trying to make with this stuff. While playing as a young Farah, for example, it's hard to tell whether the game wants you to actually feel as powerless as a child would, when, after sheepishly toying with a gun, the game rewards me with an achievement as my sudden crack shot takes both enemy soldiers down with one bullet, going from scared little kid to Rambo in an instant, I guess. It's that kind of video game silliness, the fact that you're playing a game whose central mechanics equip you to take out wave after wave of bad guys as efficiently as possible, that make it hard to take Modern Warfare particularly seriously when it suddenly applies this framework to a child. In a similar vein, when it comes to the potential threats and the homes you clear out, you never get the chance to subdue these people non-lethally. The tension as they simultaneously plead with you not to shoot while also edging towards a suspicious object totally subsides when you realise that the only option is to shoot them dead, and if you don't, someone else will. They are an enemy, the scope of the mechanics available to you has deemed them so. The character never meaningfully reflects on the things you do during gameplay. In terms of the larger story, it might as well have never happened. You don't have to worry about the implications of killing as many people as you do, and in the larger story moments where characters will ask if they went too far, crossing the line is seemingly always justified. Those people were always reaching for that detonator, they always give you that intel. It makes me think back to Spec Ops, a title that people point to as perhaps the game that nailed the twisted morality at the heart of military conflict. Arguably, the reason that game was so hard-hitting was because it saw characters crossing that line and, crucially, messing up, having to deal with the horrifying cost of the fact that they were wrong. For all that Modern Warfare speaks of getting dirty so the world stays clean, the game is a series of situations representing some really messed up stuff that it proceeds to deal with in a remarkably black and white way. The ends always justify the means. You might find yourself asking, did we need to emotionally torment that woman and child to get that intel? And the game, with its short length and multiple characters and plot threads leaving little room for introspection, seems to answer, who cares, you got it, didn't you? It's like a theme park version of Spec Ops. Any nuance flies right by you as you focus on the pure thrill of being guided through a Hollywood blockbuster. And before we continue, you should know that any criticism I have here isn't meant to come across as some kind of think of the children shock and despair. To be clear, I had a lot of fun with this dumbass campaign. Contrary to what you might think, I don't believe that every game, every military-focused action shooter needs to be some kind of deep dive into notions of imperialism, or how religion, political ideology, or economic interests play into the narrative of conflict. There is absolutely a place for that, just like there's a place for vacant escapism. And make no mistake, I think Modern Warfare is absolutely the latter. And there's an aspect to this where I think that it should be treated as such, that trying to take it seriously on its own terms is a futile act, and that your time is probably better spent just enjoying the roller coaster. I mean, the stuff where the writers and developers may have, however deliberately, pinned an alleged US war crime on Russia, sure, maybe that stuff warrants some concern, but the rest? The bit where it's getting you to survive waterboarding by dodging the water and pressing shift to pay respects to breathing? It's so daft that to give it any thought feels like a legitimate waste of time. If it takes seeing this to make someone think that waterboarding is maybe bad, then they likely had other issues to begin with. Essentially, to expect an actually thoughtful critique of military conflict from a Call of Duty game, and getting annoyed when it doesn't materialize, at this point feels akin to getting riled up by the anatomical inaccuracies of Mortal Kombat. You know, it's a cartoon. That said, it's a bit bewildering when Modern Warfare goes so far out of its way to try and question the methods of the Western military and the seemingly arbitrary decisions taken by its superiors that undermine whatever purpose your characters might have. Said characters come together for very real personal reasons that just so happen to be of momentary convenience to the US government, and the second that stops being the case, your team gets shafted. This is maybe the heaviest the devs have leaned in on the consequences of war, putting us face to face with the collateral damage. Literal babies have the potential to be caught in your crossfire. But rather than frame those consequences as reasons why we should try and avoid conflict altogether, confront the powers that benefit from your character's exploitation, or make some kind of point about how no side in any conflict is infallible, Modern Warfare instead uses these consequences to motivate our protagonist's supposedly righteous fight. You know, for as much as the game talks about how all sides are as bad as each other here, the Russians don't seem to get game overs for killing innocents like you and your band of heroes at least do. In this sense, Modern Warfare acts as an extension of what I talked about with Ace Combat earlier this year. The idea that an action-focused game about war that tries to accurately depict its horrors is almost always going to feature some contradiction at its heart. Even if you think you're making some grand point, to gamify conflict and torture like this, to reduce the failure state to "you didn't click on this thing in time, try again," is going to either simplify these issues beyond the reality of the situation or flat out trivialize them. But at the same time, despite the narrative director's claims to the contrary, it's really hard to even view Modern Warfare as truly anti-war. At best, it views conflict as an inevitability, where we might as well try to ensure that the victors are the capital G good guys, and at worst, it seems to revel in the process. In its attempts to reground Modern Warfare, the game ends up becoming exactly the kind of mindless action I was expecting out of a game like Breakpoint, where that game managed to be broken and slapdash to the extent that it felt as genuinely hostile to me as a game about being a soldier probably should. Modern Warfare doesn't want you thinking about the contradictions inherent to its campaign. It barely even wants you stopping to look behind you half the time. You just keep going forward, clicking on the right things in the right order to progress the movie, taking in the pretty explosions along the way. And what pretty explosions they are, as the moonlight illuminates your silent treks through the forest, as fireworks light up the sky. It all feels positively next gen in how it steps everything up fidelity-wise. As a technical showpiece and a series of explosive set pieces disconnected from reality, Modern Warfare is a marvel. But it's also in these technicalities, rather than any big story moment, that the game begins to realize that vision of a more complex take on war, whether intentional or not. There was one moment in particular where I realized this. It was when I was breaching a metal container, diving in and firing a shotgun. It was a breach like any other in a Call of Duty game, except this time there was one thing that had changed: the sound my gun made as I fired it. Firing a gun in open air simply adds to the usual dull cacophony of gunshots and explosions that constitute the typical Call of Duty soundscape. You become numb to it after a while. Firing it inside, however, in a big metal container, created reverberations so explosive and abrasive that it actually jolted me. There was a second where I worried about goddamn ricochet. Firing a gun in a confined space like that was, dare I say, kind of scary. It felt different. And in many ways, it is different, as evidenced by the EQ presets that greet you as you open up the game. The improvements made to audio seem just as important to the devs in bringing Call of Duty into a new era as the graphical upgrades. Perhaps it was a move fueled merely by the team's desire to get these firearms feeling chunkier or sounding cool as heck, but for me, the result of these upgrades was a bunch of otherwise minor moments being punctuated by thoughts of, damn, guns are crazy. I imagined being a child and hearing these night vision goggled robot looking dudes tearing through my house and how terrifying the sounds of that would be. How those sonic scars would stay with you like tinnitus. That even with their rules of engagement that actively punish them for shooting a child, no matter whether or not they're doing the quote unquote right thing, it's hard to think that these troops didn't severely damage a few kids along the way. And with that, the act of firing a gun, the most rudimentary aspect of a Call of Duty game, ended up feeling more morally ambiguous, inspiring more empathy than any amount of the game's trite set pieces seemingly designed to say, really makes you think, huh? It leads me to believe that if Call of Duty actually wants to go down the route of questioning the nature of conflict in the modern age, it's the little details like this, the sound of a bullet leaving the chamber, that need to be focused on. Because when it comes to depicting the horrors of war in games, cutscenes are always going to pale in comparison to imbuing your moment-to-moment interactions with the gravitas they deserve. So I hope you enjoyed my piece on Modern Warfare. Thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring the video, and for the 2-month free trial you can access via the link in the description. I'd also like to thank my patrons, without whom this show simply would not be possible. As I'm sure you're aware, YouTube ain't exactly the steadiest platform right now, so every pledge really does help enormously. If you'd like to join the names on screen, maybe consider heading to patreon.com/writingongames and pledging even $1 or $2. Thank you all so much. Special thanks go to Mark B. Writing, Artyom Vitsyuk, Hibi Amore, Rob, Bryce Snyder, Tommy Carver Chaplin, David Björk, Lucas, Dallas Keane, William Fielder, my dad, Timothy Jones, Spike Jones, The Nameless Guy, Ham Migas, Samuel Pickens, Shardfire, Anna Pimentel, Jesse Ryan, Justin Holderness, Nicholas Ross, and Charlie Yang. And with that, this has been another episode of Writing on Games. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.